Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Warcraft Radio's coverage of the Shadowlands Alpha. My name is Kexman, and I'm here to bring you your first look at the main questline throughout the zone. Now, we haven't had the intro scenario, so we don't quite know how we end up here. There's a couple of questions about the Moorsworn and the Moor. We haven't seen how we end up here. We don't know what happens, so a couple of these questions are still up in the air. We don't exactly understand it, but this is our first look at the Kyrian Covenant here in Bastion. As Blizzard themselves have said, the Kyrians are noble inhabitants of Bastion who shepherd the souls of the dead to Oribos so that they can be judged by the impassive Arbiter before being sent to their final destinations. Fresh arrivals to Bastion will become Kyrian aspirants, wingless beings who train for eons to one day earn their wings and join the ranks of the Ascended. This is essentially part of what forms the majority of our time here in Bastion, is learning about these Kyrian aspirants and almost becoming one ourselves. A lot of the people that we interact with at the start are also Kyrian aspirants. This introduction is quite nice. You very quickly learn exactly what is going on here. You learn via the story here that you're one of the first souls that have been seen in Bastion for quite a long time, almost to the point of them being very surprised. And speaking of surprising, Warcraft Radio invited me to their guild as I was recording this footage. Big up to the Warcraft Radio people on the alpha. And this is where we start to learn a little bit more about Shadowlands as a whole. One of the things that Blizzard have talked about massively is anima. They've mentioned it. There was a couple of grumblings because anima was very similar to Azerite and Artifact, both points and power. We were really worried that this was going to become part of a new system, but it doesn't seem to be. We can see here in this quest that anima powers a lot of the stuff here in Bastion, the golems especially, the designs of which look fantastic. You'll see this a lot in Bastion, this gold, white, blue colour scheme going on, especially for some of the bigger structures. Makes it stand out very easily, very easy to see. And you learn that anima powers pretty much everything here in this world, and it definitely makes for an interesting time when it comes to helping them find different things. It reminds me similarly to the magic depletion you find in Suramar. Now, this greeter here, you've got a lot of options to talk to him. None of them really mean much. It's just a little bit of flavor text. You can pause the video at any point if you wish to take a look at exactly what he's saying, but it just gives you a little bit more history behind exactly what is going on here. It mentions the Archon, which, as it says there, was the first Kyrian to ever exist. You do go on to mention about the Moor again, and there does seem to be a little bit of worry around the Kyrian when it comes to the Moor and some people they call the Moorsworn. We're not entirely sure who those are at this point in time, but I'm sure we'll find out more as the story goes on. Now, one of the nice things it does here is, again, it introduces you to the Kyrian way of thinking. Now, you'll see on your screen here there is an orange diamond. That is the new waypoint system. It will handily point you towards your location that is required for your quest. Not only will it point you in the right direction, it will also mean that if you are looking at something that is above you, you will know it is above you or below you, and you'll know exactly how far. As you're going around, you learn slightly more about exactly what entails to become a Kyrian and to move on from an aspirant into the, into the much higher echelons of the Kyrian way of thinking. It's a very nice introduction to the zone, and one I think is much better. It does mean that you have a better understanding of exactly what's going on around you. Now, with previous expansions, we have seen a little bit more freeform. You can decide where you want to go, and the introductions have felt a little bit lackluster, I suppose is the right word to use. You don't learn a lot. It throws you into the thick of things very quickly, whereas this one does seem to be a little bit more relaxed. It does seem to be a little bit more, okay, let's take our time, let's actually introduce you to the world that you are trying to become a part of, and you can kind of go from there. One of the nice things that you find as you enter into the Shadowlands Alpha is at no point do you feel rushed. Now that there is no form of Azerite or artifact power to chase, there's no real need for you to rush through so you can get to the different zones. I mean, Legion had the problem as soon as you loaded in, you had the Broken Shore quest to do, then you got your artifact weapon, then you had to go and, you know, unlock your class order hall. BFA was very similar. You got to get the Heart of Azeroth. You've got to go and start unlocking your Azerite armor. It does feel a little bit, you know, rushed. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. This is a lot more relaxed. You learn more about your surroundings, which means when it comes to endgame and you have to make the decision of who do you want to choose as your covenant, there's definitely more of a choice there for you to take hold of. Coming up shortly, we're going to be taking a look at sort of the first indication that there is much more of a military standing here in the Kyrian area. As you can see, these almost Valkyrie style creatures come swooping in. These guys do essentially turn around and say, we understand who you are, but there's still a due process to follow here. Again, there is a hierarchy to follow in the Kyrian Covenant. The Maw keeps coming up again. We don't know exactly why it mentions Kyrian of the Maw. Obviously, this is a much deeper storyline that runs throughout Shadowlands. Until we see the intro scenario, until we see some of the later zones, we don't know exactly what this is. But again, it is nice that we have this underlying story again, rather than there being 8 or 9 different stories going on for different factions. The Horde and the Alliance version of this zone is almost identical. There's very, very little difference when it comes to who you speak to. Now, as you come out of the starting zone here, this is actually where the BlizzCon demo began. So myself and Athalas, who sat through, I believe it was 3 hours of the demo, know this area very, very well. It was at this point that the BlizzCon demo started, so all of that intro we never ever saw. What this means is that a lot of the areas ahead, we knew what was happening, but a lot of spit and polish has happened with them. Now, what you'll find as you look at this area here, Bastion is an absolutely gorgeous zone, and a lot of people have been saying the same. It reminds me, with its golden fields and some of the architecture, as you can see here, reminds me almost of a mix between the ending scene of Gladiator as he's walking through the field of wheat, and almost Valhalla style. You've got your Valkyrie, you've got your very angular buildings, but there's an ornateness to them. It's almost like they've wrapped up every single area that has ever been considered a zone of the dead, quote unquote, or a zone of heroes, if you will, and almost wrapped them into one. Now, this is the first quest where we actually start to learn a little bit more about the Kyrian way of almost freeing yourself of your previous life. You know, the way that you can sort of train yourself to move on from being an aspirant. Now, the attacks, the sort of like the skills that we have here for a lot of the classes, whether it be Fury Warrior or any other one, all feel fairly strong. I think combat across the board is very, very, you know, is really, really nice. You'll kind of see here, you can still take on a couple of small mobs at a time. You don't need to worry about that. The AoE cap does kind of put a bit of a slows it down slightly, but not massively. It's not the end of the world. It's not too difficult. But as you go through all these bitter memories, you do eventually, after fighting through, I think it's 3 different rooms, all very, very similar of this style, reach Pelagos. And he seems to be in a little bit of trouble. Now, one of the things that you do find out is that there are certain rituals that Kyrian aspirants will go through to almost train themselves, to learn more about what it means to be Kyrian. And sometimes it doesn't go according to plan. And 9 times out of 10, it revolves around memories they have of their past life. We don't know whether it is a good memory, we don't know whether it's a memory that they're holding on to especially, and that's what's causing them issues, but it always seems to be something along those lines. And I think it's going to be really, really fun to see what they do with this down the line. It's entirely possible they could add characters in who we do know from Azeroth, and we see some of their memories. And you'll see by the text here that Pelagos says is that this training is not always a nice thing to go through. He does seem to struggle, he does seem to almost lose control. Now, one nice thing as you make your way out of this cave is that you actually get a buff on you that means that unless you attack any of the creatures ahead of you as you're running through, they will not attack you. It means that you don't have to fight your way into the cave, complete the objective, and then fight your way back out of the cave, which happens far too often when it comes to some of the quests that Blizzard have created in the past. Eventually you do manage to get Pelagos out of there, and you almost unite him back with Clea, who suggests that we take a trip to the dueling grounds. We learn a little bit more about who we are via sparring, and we learn a little bit more about the people around us as well. And this does give us one massive advantage when it comes to questing through this zone. It gives us a chance to have our first look at the zone from the air. And when I tell you that Bastion is a beautiful zone, I am not lying. It is absolutely breathtaking. One of the best zones that Blizzard have ever created. Coming up next, some of the best stuff that Blizzard have ever done in a questline. My name has been Kexman. I'll see you guys next time.